Good morning. Welcome to Avondale United Methodist Church. My name is Ed Armentrout, and I'm the pastor here. The scripture I have for us today is from John. It's chapter 2, verses 13 through 22, and it's where Jesus goes through and clears the temple area. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found men selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple area, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here. How dare you turn my Father's house into a market?" His disciples remembered that it is written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." Then the Jews demanded of him, "What miraculous sign can you show us to prove your authority to do all this?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." The Jews replied, "It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and you're going to raise it in 3 days." But the temple he had spoken of was his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples recalled what he had said. They believed the scripture and the words that Jesus had spoken. So I called this sermon, Trouble in the Temple. Seems like a good title for me. So give you a little background here. If you are an adult male Jew and you lived within 15 miles of Jerusalem, you were expected to attend the Passover in person. So sometimes when we read the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we have a tendency to kind of put them together, but there's a lot of differences in them. And so one of the things I want to point out to you here is that in John, Jesus is frequently in Jerusalem. In the other three Gospels, it's a lot less than that. Now, Jesus tells this event at the beginning of his ministry, but in some of the other Gospels, it appears that it comes at the end. Now, I'll talk about this in a minute, but if it happened at the first, like John tells us, then it wouldn't have had to happen later because everybody would have remembered what he did. So that's one of those things, once you do it once, you don't have to do it again. Even if they were doing the same stuff, they would have noticed and people would have cleared out the area because they wouldn't have wanted to go through that again. I think if you think about it, though, this makes more sense to a reader if you do it at the beginning as opposed to the end of his ministry. Now, people don't really know exactly why you have these differences in the Gospels. One thought could have been that when John became deceased, his writings weren't finished, so they were put together by somebody else, and so maybe the order was changed. John was probably more interested in the truth than the facts, so he didn't care that it happened, here or it happened there. He only cared that it happened, and so that could be part of the difference in these two as well. Now, why is he so angry? Well, if you were 19 or older and you were an adult and you were there, you paid a temple tax, and that's how the temple operated. And the temple tax had to be paid in Jewish shekels. So you had a lot of this other money coming in because people were coming all over the world, but the temple tax had to be paid in shekels. So the money changers there, they were taking advantage of the pilgrims because they were charging them a fee to give them shekels, and if they had to give them change for shekels, they charged them again. So they were getting fleeced. The other thing that people would do is they would bring their animals in for a sacrifice. Now, before you could do that, because the animal was expected to be perfect, they had to be inspected. And funny enough, if you brought your own animal, it never passed inspection. But if you bought one from them, it was always perfect. Now, there was also a fee for that. And you can imagine that no one ever passed because they were wanting the fee paid to them. So why is Jesus so angry about this? Well, one is God's house, his temple, is being desecrated. There's no reverence being shown. The other thing I think that's safe to say that Jesus is telling us, this whole idea of animal sacrifice isn't relevant to the worship of God. And so we'd be going, oh yeah, well, we don't have animal sacrifice. But I think there's things in our own churches that take the place of that. So you have churches that have humongous pipe organs that really becomes the center of worship. or if you have stained glass windows or any of those kind of things, if they end up taking more of the thought, the relevance in the worship than the worship of God, then I would say that those get in the way just like the animal sacrifices could. So part of the problem here is there are different sections to the temple area. And so sort of like everybody is able to go into the Gentile area. Well, the Gentile area is where all this money changing, where all this animals inspection, where all this goes on. And so you can imagine, just, you know, if you've even walked through a fairgrounds before, whether it's the sheep or the cattle, there's a lot of noise just in the background going on. And that doesn't count how many thousands of people were there at the same time. It could be that Jesus is just saying, hey, you guys have filled this area, and in this case, for everybody, especially the Gentiles who couldn't go any farther, you have filled it up with so much stuff that it is impossible to have worship here. So you've taken all these animals, you've taken the money changers, and he's more upset about the inability to have worship without all this stuff going on than the actual fact that it's going on. I mean, there's logical reasons for the money changers to be there, for the shekels to pay the temple tax. If you do want to take your animal for sacrifice, so a dove was for someone that was poor. As you became more wealthy, then it would become a lamb or a calf. So it was about money. Some of that makes sense because if you're walking for, 15 miles and you've got whatever, it might not be able to make the trip if it's hot and dry and you've got to be able to take care of them. That's not so much what he's upset about. He's upset about the way it caused people not to be able to worship God, that it was an interference in their worship. And think of the most noisy place you've ever been, and maybe a fair is a perfect example. You have all the noise of what we would see at a fair, our rides and the cattle and the people and the concessions and the barkers. That's kind of all going on here, and people are trying to worship God at the same time. So I think for us, what we can get out of this is, are we making church open for everybody, or are we making it closed? So what the Jewish people really did, they said, well, everybody can come, but the part that you get to come to is going to be real confusing and crowded and noisy, and it's almost going to be impossible to worship. So is our church open? And when we say everybody can come, really means everybody can come because everybody has a place to worship. Or in this case, I would say their worship area was really closed. Even though it was open to everybody, because it was open to everybody and everything, it made worship almost impossible. So I think that's important for us at this time of Lent. How do we help people become prepared to worship God? Because some people need a lot of quiet. Some people don't need that much quiet. But it's not a question of what we individually need for us. It's more of a question is, how do we make it the best we can for other people that may have a relationship with God but need that time, or looking for that first time relationship with the Lord, and we've made it almost impossible for that to happen. So think about that as we continue through this Lenten season, and whether you make that situation personally better or worse for those around you, or better for worse than for you individually. So this Sunday, the first Sunday of the month, we always have Holy Communion, and that's open to everyone. We continue to serve a meal for the community on Thursday evenings. That roughly starts at 5 p.m. and it's usually over by 6 at the latest. The kitchen's a little messed up because we're having some work done on it, and so the food has to be a little simpler till we get through this construction area, but it's available for everyone. And there's an Alcohol Anonymous meeting that meets here on Tuesday evenings, and that's open for both men and women. If there's anything that we could help you with, if you needed someone to come and do communion at a nursing home or your home, or if you have some group that might be open to that, we would certainly work with you to make that happen. Again, you're always welcome here at Avondale. If you have any questions, you can reach me at 765-749-4354. Again, my phone number is 765-749-4354. I hope you enjoyed the message today, and we look forward to seeing you.